Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. Today I wanted to talk about the Fiendsmith engine. I know it's already been out for quite some time, but there is an aspect of the Fiendsmith engine that I don't really see anybody talk about ever that I think is really important to cover. And that's the varying degrees of the Fiendsmith engine and how many cards you want to use in your deck. I think this ends up directly correlating to how much of Fiendsmith you want to utilize with your other engine. If you're just looking to make Caesar and not really do anything else, then you can play a more minimalist or slim package. If you want to use Fiendsmith to pivot from Fiendsmith into your deck's other engine, then you could start looking at the more standardized package, which includes stuff like Sequence. However, if you are looking for Fiendsmith to be a more prominent part of your deck, then you could do the expanded Fiendsmith engine. So we're going to cover all three of these engines today. I'm going to show you the minimum amount of cards required for each of these packages, how to combo with each of these packages, and the style of deck that each of these packages is best suited for. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. We're going to get right on into it as soon as I give a quick shout out up top to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. If you are looking to see YouTube content like this early, you're going to want to hit the join button down below next to subscribe, and then you can see all content as soon as it gets uploaded as opposed to when it gets scheduled to go out, which is sometimes up to a week in advance. We also have a few members only videos. If you're looking for more exclusive videos though, head over to patreon.com/hexlex. I upload at least 3 times a week over there, and it's all unique stuff. Nothing on the Patreon is stuff that gets uploaded on YouTube. We often look at new card reveals as they're announced. We look at metagame reports, we look at replays I don't have time to get to here on the main channel. So if you want extra content, patreon.com/hexlex. Either way, whether you join as a member or subscribe on Patreon, you get your name at the end credits of every video. So let's go ahead and get right on into the Fiendsmith engines now. Okay, let's start off with the minimal Fiendsmith package. This is a version of the engine that you're probably going to see more often in OCG builds than anywhere else, because in the OCG, Engraver is limited to 1. So you don't always get to use a lot of the fancy extended plays there, and a lot of the decks as a result will go for this very minimalist package. However, this is really the version of the Fiendsmith engine that I never see people really talking about in Master Duel. And I think that it's one that should be considered a lot more. Basically, if your only goal for the Fiendsmith engine in your deck is to summon Caesar and nothing else, like if you don't care about Fiendsmith being able to pivot into your deck's other engine and you just want to summon Caesar and add it to your end board, then you really should be considering this package. I see a lot of people use the standard Fiendsmith engine, which of course we'll talk about next, and they use that to just turbo out Caesar and not do anything else. But as I mentioned before, if Fiendsmith does not pivot into your deck's regular engine, if the only thing you want to do with your Fiendsmith package is summon Caesar, then you really should be on this more minimal build. For the main deck, the only requirement is one single Engraver in the main deck. The extra deck does require 4 slots, those being Necroquip Princess, DDD Wave High King Caesar, Fiendsmith's Requiem, and a Boot of the Closed Heaven, or another Light Fiend extra deck monster to be able to pivot into with Fiendsmith. We'll talk about some of the alternative options towards the end when I talk about alternative Fiendsmith cards that don't necessarily make it into the standardized packages, but yeah, this is really all you need to be able to summon out a Caesar, is just the 1 Engraver in main deck, like I said, and your 4 extra deck cards. Now, because your only Fiendsmith card in the main deck is Engraver, this is probably the only package where you really don't want to open Engraver, right? Because we're not even playing Tract or Lurie or Lacrima or any of that stuff. So if you open Fiendsmith's Engraver, it's just going to sit in your hand until Requiem is able to summon it out, which is obviously not ideal. So again, for this package, you don't want to open Engraver, you want it to stay in your deck. But at the same time, we only have the 1 Engraver in our deck and nothing else, so that's not really that big of a deal. Let me show you an example of the minimal Fiendsmith engine line in practice. Okay, so let me show you how to combo with the minimal Fiendsmith engine. I'm just using Sprite as the deck for all of my examples here because it's the easiest to get multiple bodies on board. So once you have any 2 effect monsters on board, like so, obviously for Sprite you'd want to go into like Sprint here, but if you get any 2 effect monsters on your board as part of your combo line, then we can use the 2 of them to link into Moon of the Closed Heaven. This, of course, being one of the main reasons why the Fiendsmith engine is so prominent, is because you can link any 2 effect monsters into Moon, and that's a Light Fiend, and you're good to go. So, once you've got Moon in play, you can link away the Moon for the Fiendsmith's Requiem. And now we can activate Fiendsmith's Requiem to tribute. And because Engraver is the only card in the minimal Fiendsmith package, we're going to go ahead and summon that. Now, obviously, you saw the Lacrima in there, but we're going to pretend for the sake of example she's not in there. So we're going to go Requiem for Engraver. Now we can activate the graveyard effect of Requiem, equipping to the Engraver. And you'll notice that our extra deck just lit up as soon as that happened, because now we have the option to summon Necroquip Princess. Necroquip is the fusion of any monster equipped with a monster card plus 1 Fiend monster card. So, even though the Requiem is in the spell trap zone, it still counts as a monster card, meaning that it can still be used as fusion material for Necroquip. So, we can special summon Necroquip by sending the above cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard. We're going to activate and we're going to send the Fiendsmith's Requiem plus the Engraver it's equipped to, and that lets us summon out the Necroquip Princess. Now, we can use the graveyard effect of that Engraver and return Moon of the Closed Heaven to the deck. And by doing so, we are now able to revive the Engraver. At which point you have 2 level 6 Fiend monsters, and they can be overlaid into the Caesar. So there you go. That's how you start with any 2 effect monsters and with the minimal package end on the Caesar. As mentioned, this package is really only good for making Caesar and not doing anything else. So if that's all you need your Fiendsmith engine to do, then this is how you do it. Okay, let's move on to a more standard Fiendsmith engine. This has a lot more of the stuff that you would expect to see when you think of Fiendsmith cards, right? Like the Tract for Lurie, the Engraver to search the Tract, Lacrima, which we're summoning off the Fiendsmith's Requiem, Sequence to summon out the Fiendsmith's Lacrima, which is able to summon out the Wave High King Caesar. So the reason, again, as I've been stating, that you would want to use this over the more minimal package, the more slimmed down one, is because you want to have an extra body on board besides the Caesar. Because this line that I'm about to show you will not only end you on the Caesar, but you have the Sequence left over on the field, which can be used as a material for various combo lines. Now, if you don't have any other follow-up plays with the Sequence, then it's just going to kind of end up sitting on the field, which is why you really want to have something to do with it if you're going to be playing the standard package. This is, I think, the biggest deck building misplay that I see people making when they're including a Fiendsmith engine, right? They're including this standard package when they don't really have any plans to use Fiendsmith to pivot into their other engine. They're just kind of using all of these cards to make Caesar and not do anything else. Again, if all you want to do is summon Caesar and nothing else with Fiendsmith, you really should be using the minimal package. But one thing you'll notice missing that you might consider part of the standard package is the Desiree. You might be thinking, well, where's Desiree? We have Fiendsmith's Lacrima, but we need our other option to be able to make. And this, I think this is another kind of big deck building misplay I see people make when building Fiendsmith. Now, don't get me wrong, Desiree is a really solid card, and it does give you something to do with your Sequence, right? You, of course, obviously equip the Sequence to the Desiree, and then you have a quote-unquote Omni-Negate. It can negate any face-up card on the field, which is like not really an Omni because it can't stop stuff in the hand or graveyard, but close enough, right? Okay, so the reason why I don't have Desiree as part of the standard engine is because I think for most modern Fiendsmith decks, you really just want to be summoning Caesar. I think that in an average deck that's not centered around Fiendsmith specifically, the Caesar is just going to be the stronger disruption. It can disrupt multiple effects, you know, one per overlay unit, so you get 2 separate summon negates as opposed to just one on-field negate. And, you know, again, Desiree can only negate cards on the field. Caesar can stop effects in the hand or graveyard. Now, obviously, the biggest drawback is that Caesar can only negate effects that relate to summoning monsters, whereas Desiree can negate any face-up card on the field. But that said, as mentioned before, I really just do think that the Caesar is going to be the better end board option. And historically, if you look back at Fiendsmith lists, you know, from the time the deck came out up to this point, or I should say decks that are utilizing Fiendsmith as an engine, you'll see Desiree start to fall off pretty quickly over time. It just ends up being not quite as good and requiring another extra deck slot, right? I guess to be fair, if you really wanted to summon Desiree and not Caesar, you could cut Lacrima and Caesar, but again, I don't think that's as good. So anyway, let me show you how to combo with more of like this standard Fiendsmith engine. Okay, so again, I'm just using Sprite as kind of an easy way to get multiple bodies on board, but if you start with any 2 effect monsters, in this case I'll just go ahead and Fenrir for Fenrir, and then normal summon the Swap Frog, and dump Eold Ronin Totem. But okay, so if you're in a scenario like this where you've got any 2 effect monsters and you want to pivot into Fiendsmith, with the standard engine, we're going to begin the same way we did last time by taking our 2 effect monsters and turning them into Moon of the Closed Heaven. And then from there, we're going to turn that into Fiendsmith's Requiem. Now, for the minimal package, we just went straight for the Engraver with the Requiem. Here, however, we definitely want to summon out the Lacrima. And then we can go Lacrima Effect. We're going to send one of our Engravers to the graveyard. Alright, now we're going to activate the Engraver effect. We're going to put back the Moon of the Closed Heaven and summon Engraver out to the field. And now that we have 2 monsters, including a Light Fiend, we can summon out Fiendsmith Sequence by linking away Engraver plus Lacrima the Crimson Tears. And then we're going to activate Sequence to Fusion Summon. And here we're going to want to summon out the Fiendsmith's Lacrima, and we have to put back exactly Fiendsmith's Requiem plus Lacrima the Crimson Tears. We need the Fiendsmith Engraver to remain in the graveyard, so that way the Fiendsmith's Lacrima gets to activate in order to revive. Now, there's an interesting thing that you can do with Fiendsmith's Lacrima. If you wanted to, instead of making Caesar, make a Link monster, you could, in theory, click No here, and it would add Engraver to your hand instead. Then you could activate Engraver from hand, discard to add Tract, and then Tract for Lurie, discarding Fabled Lurie, and then summoning. And then you'd be able to make a Link 4 monster with your bodies on board. This was a lot more popular when Appaloosa was still legal and a very, very good endboard piece, but nowadays it's pretty typical that you'll just revive the Engraver. And then we will make the Caesar, using our 2 level 6 Fiend monsters. But as I mentioned before, and as you can see, this iteration of the combo line has left the Fiendsmith Sequence on the board. And in fact, with this setup, we could, in theory, use the Ronin Totem in order to revive. And then now, as you can see, we can use the sequence to make Sprint, or I guess if you really wanted to, Gigantic or Elf, but Sprint would be the best option here. But more importantly, you're really seeing that this sequence is important to making or continuing our plays. In certain other decks, you'll be able to more directly use the Fiendsmith cards to combo with your main deck. For example, with Fiendsmith and Yummy, you could go Lurie plus Requiem into the Cupsy Yummy way, right? And that is your Fiendsmith cards directly leading into your other deck's combo line. But as you can see here, a lot of decks can even just make use of the remaining sequence on board in order to be able to link and make plays. So that's, I think, again, where a lot of people kind of misplay in deck building we're making when including the Fiendsmith stuff, right? If you're making Caesar, but you always have this awkward leftover sequence, you should, again, probably consider going to the more minimal package and then utilize the sequence in a build where it can be used as a material to continue your combo. Or, again, you're using your other Fiendsmith cards, like Lurie or whatever, in order to be able to combo. Another great example of this is using Lacrima the Crimson Tears in order to be able to make a rank 4, like in Snake Eye, or in the example of Mitsurugi as well, making King of the Pharaoh Imps. So just some more food for thought as far as how to utilize these bodies in order to be able to actually do your engine's main combo line on top of making the Caesar. And finally, this is the more expanded Fiendsmith engine here. This is something that you would see a little bit more often in decks like Fiendsmith Control, or just kind of like an engine pile deck that's using a bunch of like Fiendsmith plus Bestial, K9 in recent times. A lot of the time it's using a lot of that. Just a lot of these sort of like engines piled together all into one deck. This is where Fiendsmith is going to be more of the focus, and not just, again, an offshoot Caesar plus sometimes an extra material to make something else. So the big differences here are we are going to be summoning Desiree a lot in this iteration of the engine, because this iteration of the engine also plays Fiendsmith's Ognum Day. This is another deck building misplay I tend to see people make, is including Fiendsmith's Ognum Day in decks like Elf Note, where I don't think they have the extra deck space for it. And also, again, a deck like Elf Note, when utilizing Fiendsmith, is a lot of the time really just looking to add Caesar to their end board. Whereas Ognum Day is looking to set up a huge Desiree to not only potentially negate, but also have a lot of attack points, as well as, of course, the target protection that the sequence offers. So for the combo line I'm about to show you, it's more about ending on the Desiree equipped with multiple cards, and that's really part of where I think Desiree's strength shines. Desiree with only Sequence equipped is not nearly as scary as Desiree with Sequence plus Ognum Day. Not only can you negate up to 5 cards, although it all has to be at once, moreover, again, it makes your Desiree a much more legitimate, like, game-ending threat. On the follow-up turn, the Desiree will threaten to put in a ton of damage, because it also gains piercing as well as a ton of attack points. For the main deck, the main difference here is that we're having a lot more starters for our Fiendsmith engine. So if you own multiple copies of Lacrima, you could consider that. If you own multiple copies of Tract, you could play those. Fiendsmith Sanct is another great starter for the Fiendsmith engine, getting you a Light Fiend token. Obviously, 1 Light Fiend is enough to begin your plays. It's just worth noting that you can only attack with Fiend monsters for the rest of the turn. So outside of turn 1, or also outside of a very, very dedicated Fiendsmith build, it might not be as good, but it's still a really solid card worth considering for an expanded package. And Fiendsmith in Paradise is a great disruption tool for the Fiendsmith, like the expanded, I should say, Fiendsmith engine. Not only for its face down, on a field effect, but we're also able to make a lot of use of the secondary graveyard effects, because it can be sent to the graveyard by Lacrima the Crimson Tears. So that will enable you to potentially set up some disruption. The idea here of using this second effect as disruption is that you're going to be sending Desiree from your extra deck to the graveyard. And then when it's sent to the graveyard, Desiree not only can put another Light Fiend back, but then it also targets a card on the field and destroys it. You could also consider, for this expanded package, you could consider Rex Tremend, but I think even for this expanded Fiendsmith package, Rex Tremend ends up being really, really, really optional. I'll talk a little bit more about Rex Tremend here later, but for now, let me show you a combo line where we're setting up the huge Desiree with the more expanded Fiendsmith engine. Okay, so once again, just utilizing Sprite really quick to get multiple bodies on board. But yeah, now I'll show you the expanded Fiendsmith combo line. So it's going to be relatively similar to the standard one. We'll just mix it up towards the end. I'm going to link away 2 effect monsters in order to make Moon of the Closed Heaven. Now from there we can turn Moon into the Requiem. And then we'll go Requiem effect. And we will special summon Lacrima, the Crimson Tears. We're going to go Lacrima effect, sending an Engraver from our deck to the graveyard. Now we get to activate the effect of our Engraver. We're going to shuffle back Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then revive. Now, like last time, we're going to turn our 2 Fiendsmith monsters into sequence. Like so. And now we're going to activate the sequence effect. We're going to summon out Desiree, and we're going to end up putting back all 3, because of course Desiree needs 3 monsters as material. Now, you could activate Sequence now to equip to Desiree, but I actually don't want to do that. We're going to instead link Desiree and Sequence into Fiendsmith's Ognum Day. Now, as a fun bonus, if you're going second, or your opponent has a card in the field otherwise, you can activate Desiree's effect in order to destroy it, which is really cool. But we're going to activate the Ognum Day effect, targeting the Fiendsmith's Desiree in our graveyard in order to revive, and then equip, and then we can still activate Sequence from the graveyard in order to equip to the Desiree as well. So this is kind of what I was talking about when this more expanded Fiendsmith engine is really looking to utilize the Desiree as a big boss monster, not only capable of negating up to 5 cards at once. That's very important to note. You get 1 activation to negate up to 5 face-up cards. So not only that, but obviously it's got the 5,800 attack points, the Sequence, it says it can't be targeted, and then the Ognum Day will also give it trample, or piercing, I should say. Trample, wow, magic brained much? It'll give you piercing on top of, obviously, the huge attack buff as well. So, yeah, again, if you're in a more dedicated Fiendsmith deck, then I would definitely try to set this up. A lot of the reason that we're not doing this in decks that play the standard Fiendsmith engine is really more for extra deck space. Having to dedicate an extra deck slot to Ognum Day as well as Desiree on top of potentially the Caesar line really does get to be a lot if you try to do all of that at once. That's why I would really only recommend this line or this kind of setup for, again, a kind of Fiendsmith control deck or a pile of like Fiendsmith, Bestial, Canine, whatever else you want to use. So that's really how I would utilize Desiree with the more expanded Fiendsmith engine. Alright, now here real quick at the end, there were a few other cards that I did kind of want to talk about a little bit in relation to their potential usage with Fiendsmith. They're not things that I would always play, even in the expanded engine, but they're things that you could certainly think about. Dippity being one of the first ones I kind of wanted to go over here. This was more popular, again, back when Fiendsmith and also the Primite engines very first came out. Fiendsmith, Primite, Control, that kind of style of deck hasn't really been seen, or at least I haven't seen it in quite some time, but I think it's still at least decent, and it's super worth considering. So, Dippity, as you can see, is a late Fiend monster, and it's a vanilla, no effect with 0 attack and defense. Obviously, the use case for this, as I just mentioned, would be for the Primite engine. This card could be summoned off of Lordly Load or Roar. This opens up the use of the Drill Beam loop to get you some more disruption. I would probably only do something like this with an expanded Fiendsmith engine. I wouldn't try to jam all of this in a deck that's also trying to use the standard Fiendsmith engine to combo, but it is definitely something worth considering. Dippity is also not the only light Fiend vanilla monster. There is also the White Dust Sun as well. The Dippity is typically considered to be better though because of the fact that it's level 4, makes it easier to synchro summon. Oh, and actually, speaking of synchro summoning, I almost forgot one of our Honorary Mention cards I'll talk about here in a second. But yeah, if you're gonna go for a vanilla light Fiend monster to use with the Primite engine, then I would probably just consider the Dippity as well. Other decks, by the way, / engines that can go into Fiendsmith pretty easily, well, for one, all you have to really do to find them is just go ahead and go here and search Light Fiend, but I was thinking particularly of the Live / Evil Twin deck. Has a lot of light Fiends within it, which is obviously very easy to then pivot into your Fiendsmith engine. There's also Hero, actually has a pretty decent way to pivot into Fiendsmith because they play the Evil Hero Adusted Gold. Already a really good card for the deck, especially if they're utilizing more of the Evil Hero engine, but as you can see, also a light Fiend. So that's another deck that has a lot of ways to pivot there. Fabled, obviously an archetype full of light fiends, also really likes the Fiendsmith engine. And actually, speaking of Fabled cards, oh, I didn't even include it. I thought that was in there, my bad. Is it this one? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, speaking of Fabled cards, here, most of these cards here are like alternative ways from Moon of the Closed Heaven to go into the Fiendsmith engine, right? Moon of the Closed Heaven, having been banned in both the TCG and OCG, means that its time on Master Duel could very easily be limited. And as we've seen, demonstrated so far in all the different combo lines, Moon is a really, really easy way to turn any 2 effect monsters into a Light Fiend. But there are definitely other extract monsters that, while more narrow, can do it as well. Speaking again of Fabled, the Fabled Levelzable is a generic level 10 synchro monster that is also a Light Fiend, and it's also pretty good with its own effect to be able to take control of monsters, even if you don't play other Fabled cards. So, solid level 10 generic synchro that you could use to go into Fiendsmith, definitely considered a Fabled Levelzable. Armades is another generic synchro monster that's a Light Fiend, this one being level 5. If you have the ability to go into that, that's going to be Elf Note, obviously a lot in the current meta. Xyz monsters have their own ways too. If you have any 2 level 3s, you can overlay them into Mellow Melody the Brass Gen, a rank 3 Light Fiend, or if you have any 2 level 4s, you can overlay them into Evil Swarm Exciton Knight, a rank 4 Light Fiend. And Exciton Knight is also just a really, really good card too, to have in any deck that can make a rank 4. Now, as far as Link monsters go, a lot of the Light Fiends are going to be higher Link rating. Nightmare Griffin is a pretty solid example of another card that's like really good disruption on its own, but if you really wanted to, could also be linked into the Fiendsmith's Requiem. Now, turning a Link 4 into a Link 1 is typically going to be a loss of a lot of bodies, so it's not really that easy to do a lot of the time. Underworld Goddess, however, being a Link 5, can be used using one of your opponent's monsters. So if you're playing a deck with like IP Masquerena as well as the Fiendsmith engine, you could consider like making IP on your turn 1, on your opponent's turn, using IP to make Underworld Goddess using one of their monsters. Obviously, then Underworld Goddess will negate everything on the field and also stop effects that revive a monster from the graveyard by negating that as well. And then on your follow-up turn, you can link away Underworld Goddess for Fiendsmith's Requiem. I have actually done that a couple of times, playing IP, Underworld, and a Fiendsmith engine all in the same deck. And for Fusion Summoners, Magnum the Reliever. Not really like the most popular fusion monster, but it is really generic, and it is also a Light Fiend. Now, kind of like making a Link 4 or 5, I think fusion summoning is going to take a lot of dedication and or materials. But you never know, maybe there's a fusion deck out there that doesn't lock you into fusion, but can incidentally make Magnum as part of its combo line, and then pivot into Fiendsmith. If not now, could happen at some point in the future. I think these sort of generic Light Fiends are just super worth keeping in mind for when Moon of the Closed Heaven gets banned, you want to pivot into Fiendsmith using other things. Now, there's a couple of other cards I haven't talked about yet. Fiendsmith's Rex Tremend I actually did touch on. So you could utilize Rex Tremend in the expanded Fiendsmith package, and you could end on it instead of the Desiree. I believe you could also even set up the Fiendsmith in Paradise. Yeah, because you could send a Fiendsmith in Paradise and then add it off the Rex Tremend effect. Oh, that's only when it's sent to the graveyard, though. Oh, but you could link it into the Ognum Day. That's how they do it. Yeah. They link Rex Tremend to make Ognum Day revive Rex Tremend, and then Rex Tremend can search the Fiendsmith in Paradise. So if you wanted, you could end on this sort of Towers monster with the trap card that's a board wipe. That said, I think Desiree equipped with Sequence and Ognum Day does end up just being better most of the time, but Rex Tremend is an option. Rex Tremend is also occasionally used as part of helping another deck make its plays. The most notable example being White Forest. The White Forest Fiendsmith line basically gets the Esteller into the graveyard. Then you use Rex Tremend in order to discard a spell or trap card. That will in turn trigger the Esteller effect to revive, and then you can use Esteller to combo into White Forest. Oh, another card I actually almost forgot that Fiendsmith can very easily go into that sets up certain decks' plays is Aerial Eater. Aerial Eater is a Fiend fusion monster whose materials are just 2 fiends with the same attribute. Obviously, Fiendsmiths all being white fiends, very easy to summon. Then, you can send any Fiend monster from your deck to the graveyard. We've seen Fiendsmith use Aerial Eater in a couple of different decks to set up plays, Ubel being one of the more prominent ones, being able to set up your Ubel Fiend monsters in the graveyard, like your Gruesome Gravesquirmer or your Samsara D Lotus, in order to then revive with effects potentially like Muckraker from the Underworld. And we've also seen it utilized, I think, in like Chimera decks, right? To send Fiend monsters. Basically, if you have any amount of Fiend monsters you want in the graveyard, using the Fiendsmith engine to go into Aerial Eater is a really solid way of setting that up. Definitely should be here as part of the Honorary Mentions. Not always utilized, but often utilized. And the last card I want to talk about here that can be used in Fiendsmith is Chaos Angel. While the Fiendsmith archetype itself does not have any tuner monsters, Chaos Angel can use any light or dark monster you control as a tuner. It's also level 10. So if you have the light level 4 Lacrima of the Crimson Tears plus the light level 6 Fiendsmith Engraver, you can turn both of those into Chaos Angel. Not only will you then get to banish an opponent's card, but of course you'll get the light effect of Chaos Angel, which says your synchro monsters, obviously including itself, are unaffected by your opponent's activated monster effects, which is really, really cool. Okay, I think that's actually everything. I think I finally remembered everything here. So, yeah, there we go. Like I said, I really wanted to take the time to talk about the various iterations of the Fiendsmith engine because I didn't see a lot of people discussing this before. And again, I see so many players out there with like the Lacrima Lurie tracked sequence in their deck, but then all they're doing is making the Caesar, and they could definitely be using the Slim package if all they want to do is make Caesar. So worth considering, I think. But if you watched the entire video, thank you so very much. Let me know what you think of videos of this style, by the way, and I would be glad to talk about engines, techs, deck building choices like this more in the future. But for the time being, I think that's going to go ahead and do it. So we're going to move on now to our outro, where we are going to thank those YouTube members and Patreon subscribers for their very generous support. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.